Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Mental Health Impact Series show. Once again on a Friday, Season 2, Episode 11. My name is Aanchal, your host, the CEO and founder at Reach Out Together Foundation. We are here with a very, very special guest with us, the one and only Sarah Thompson from UK. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, could you introduce yourself to the audience, share a bit professional background?
Yep, so of course, my name is Sarah Thompson and I'm a mental health practitioner in the UK. So currently located in Cornwall and working in mental health crisis care for adults at the moment. I also have a background as a children's wellbeing practitioner working with children previous to this. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Sarah, on a Friday to raise awareness on such an important topic, right? Mental health. Could you share what brought you here today to talk on our show to raise awareness?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a huge advocate of mental health and mental health awareness, really, and normalizing the experience of mental health. I think it's so important. And especially during the pandemic and working in crisis care, I think what is not as much in the media is the paralleled mental health crisis that has accompanied it. And whilst we've all been in lockdown and we've all been almost struggling alone, but yet because of the same crisis, I think now more than ever, it's important that we are able to talk about these things.
Absolutely. And you said that you work in crisis care at the moment. What organization are you representing or do you work for?
So I work for the National Health Service, so the NHS. So that's the public body. So in the UK, we all pay our taxes, which partly pays for free access to healthcare, which includes mental health care.
And from your experience, like how has the outreach been for mental health services?
I think the outreach has been not as much as the inreach. So what I mean by that is that I feel like mental health services have been inundated with people presenting in crisis during the pandemic, rather than it being a case that mental health services are reaching those that might not otherwise access mental health services at this time, if that makes sense. So in other words, what I'm saying is those who don't reach out and seek support are therefore suffering and kind of going under the radar and not being picked up. And there's not anything much to capture that population at the moment.
That's such an interesting insight, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that. We already have a couple of comments from the audience here. These conversations are always so informative and helpful. Thank you so much for doing these. We want more. I love that. Thank you. Whoever is out there watching, really appreciate you. Another comment is, I've been waiting all week for this interview. So excited to hear your story, Sarah. I think this is Brad. I think this is Brad once again. Thank you for being here, Brad. Sarah, would you mind sharing with the audience, like it has been asked, a little bit about yourself? How did you get into this industry to want to help other people?
Yeah, so I actually planned my whole career path when I was 14 years old. And I'm still on that career path and I'm now twice as old. But yeah, it's been a passion for a long time. And I guess I didn't necessarily at the time understand why I was so drawn to the field and why I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So that's still the journey that I'm on. But what I did know is that I wanted to understand behavior, because I didn't necessarily understand social norms. And I now know that that's because I identify and have a diagnosis of Asperger's, or Asperger's is what I like to call it because I like a soft G, which means that I personally identify as being a person of neurodiverse identity. And so that means that I don't necessarily conform to the social nuances or social structures that most people are automatically familiar with. As part of growing up, we learn social customs and things like that, but it didn't come as naturally to me, I guess is what I'm saying. And so, yeah, that also includes, so I also have a diagnosis of ADHD, which is also part of neurodiversity. So it's a whole collection of different presentations, including dyslexia and dyspraxia as well. So all of these different things were part of what was going on for me and not feeling understood, particularly within my own family and within my friendships, and just feeling very different and not knowing why. So I continued my journey in education, which was also quite difficult. It's quite challenging, more than most. So I did my undergrad psychology degree, also did a postgraduate qualification in psychological wellbeing, and I'm currently doing a master's. So I'm a trainee clinical associate psychologist at the moment. So yeah.
Wow, isn't that incredible, Sarah? Talk about channeling what is happening to what you want to create. That's just so beautiful. Thank you. You mentioned neurodiversity. For people that don't know what that entails, could you explain what is neurodiversity?
So yeah, it basically means that your brain is wired differently. So, you know, the way that you make connections and understand language is different. So for instance, I might take something that's said in jest quite literally and be trying to figure that out. And it could be quite a common saying, and I still haven't got my head around it because I take things literally, and it's not meant to be taken literally. Or yeah, so things like jokes or puns, or, you know, maybe it's indirects or an inside joke, and maybe I don't catch on as quickly. But yeah, it's about your brain being wired differently. On the other hand, it also has a lot of strengths with it. So I don't see it as being either a positive or a negative, it's just a difference. So for instance, people who are neurodiverse tend to be, for instance, there's many famous people. So like Einstein and Bill Gates, and there's many famous people that have been coined as neurodiverse. I do apologize for my cat in the background who's joining in. Yeah. So yeah, they tend to be creative, and because they think in a different way, they tend to be pioneers in their fields. So when we think of Darwin, for example, you know, they think of things that nobody else has thought about because they make those connections differently. They're quite creative. Or even will.i.am, who, you know, I believe has ADHD. So and Will Smith as well, I think. Yeah, so yeah, tend to be quite creative and quite different in their way of thinking, which makes them able to conceptualize ideas that have not been thought about in that way before.
I love how you are talking about it in the positive light. For anyone out there that resonated with that, I hope you're able to go look up some of the examples that Sarah mentioned, because it is about what you can do with the additional gifts, so to say, you know, that you're experiencing. So let's move on, Sarah, to talk about social inclusion. I know that's one of the topics that you wanted to raise awareness about. In general, you're a huge advocate. What brought you to raise awareness in this field? And why is it important for us to be inclusive socially?
It's important for us to be inclusive because we all deserve a voice and we all deserve to be counted. We all deserve to be held and understood. And without us working together to raise awareness and to include people that otherwise might be marginalized, then as a community as a whole, we are leaving others behind, and therefore we're not growing communally as much as we could either, if that makes sense. So yeah, in the same way that we might say it takes a village to raise a child kind of thing, you know, it's about how that village works together. In the same way that we have all different job occupations, and together we, you know, make all these different systems and how they work, you know. But if you take away one job role in an organization, say it's HR, then you can easily lose a lot of that productivity and it doesn't work as effectively. So we need to be inclusive in those ways.
Absolutely. And what would you say would be the role of mental health practitioners when it comes to addressing this? Because, you know, we all technically, in order to be socially inclusive, right? There's so many people that come from different cultural backgrounds. So when it comes to receiving mental health support and care, how, from your experience, how is it in UK? Like, are there mental health services that are catered to different cultures? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think we still got a long way to go, to answer that in short. I think we need to do a lot more to be inclusive, because at the moment, even diagnostic manuals, and that's, you know, it doesn't matter where you are, Canada, the USA, the UK, they're typically based on the white male presentation. So we've got quite an archaic system. So when you think about inclusion from that perspective, and the fact that we're still using those systems, then yeah, we have a very long way to go before we're inclusive. To my knowledge, there's not many specific organizations in mental health at the moment that do cater to particular populations of people when it comes to race, culture, religion. But I think individual practitioners speaking to intersectionality and all the different aspects that make the person as a whole is really, really important. We do need to have a holistic way of viewing the person, because we cannot be appreciated as a whole person without being able to recognize all those different aspects that are part of us, if that makes sense. So for me to, you know, be represented as a woman, but for it to be overlooked that I'm Black can actually be problematic, because my culture and my identity and my sense of self is all tied into every one of those aspects that helps me to relate to who I am.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you, Sarah. Given everything that's happening right now with the pandemic, I can't even imagine how busy you must be. So we once again really appreciate you sharing your time with us, Sarah. Why today is it important for us to encourage our community members or encourage each other to be advocates, or to just simply talk about mental health?
Because we all experience mental health. We all have good days and bad days, terrible days and great days. Mental health in itself is a spectrum, and that's inside and outside of diagnosis. You don't need to have an official diagnosis to experience difficulties with mental health, and that could be due to a life event. Maybe someone's passed in your family, or maybe you've just moved house. That can be stressful, you know, and present in all different ways. Maybe you are inundated with work, and that's making your job difficult to, you know, connect with. It's all different ways that we're affected, but we are all affected. So being able to normalize that experience means that as a community and as individuals, we're better able to seek help, and we're better able to feel okay about not being okay. We're not okay 100% of the time, and that's okay. That's normal human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the ways, Sarah, we can encourage people to advocate for mental health?
by saying me too, you know, like it's as simple as that, you know, when you're having an off day, you know, like being able to say, do you know what, I've had the worst day today, you know, and having those conversations that might feel a little difficult. And I think particularly in certain cultures and with certain communities, when we're talking about aspects of race and things like that, I feel like there's a lot of stigma that makes that conversation difficult. So there's a long way to go there as well. But the more we advocate and are able to talk about our journeys and our experience, the more we can inspire others and give that inspiration and that empowerment to say me too, to make it a normal experience so that others don't have to struggle in silence.
Love that. Couple of comments coming in here. So true. Outreach versus inreach. Never really thought of it that way. Absolutely. That was actually mind blowing. So thank you for sharing that. Another comment is, I have also been waiting excitedly for this interview. Great insights already. Absolutely great insights already. Sarah, we have another question here that's actually privately sent to me. So I'm going to ask you. I think this was perhaps a member from, I don't know, member of one of the ambassadors that work with us. What is the difference between mental health problems versus mental illness?
It's an interesting question. There doesn't necessarily have to be a difference, if I'm honest. I mean, it's kind of similar to what I was saying earlier about diagnosis. If you never seek help and you don't get a diagnosis, does that mean that you're not diagnosable? No, it doesn't really. You can have a mental health condition that's not diagnosable. So for example, you could, you know, be really sad, you know, for a few days in a row, and maybe you don't even understand why, because that happens. You know, you're just feeling really off and you can't seem to shake it. That's still a mental health condition because you're still impacted. It's about your affect, how you're feeling, your emotions, you know, the way you think, you know, that constitutes a condition. In terms of a problem, it becomes a problem, I think, mostly when we don't seek help, or we don't have that support, when we don't have a support network, when we don't have friends and family that we feel we can turn to, when we feel quite isolated, when we don't address the problem ourselves, you know, like, because there's lots of self-help materials these days. And when we don't know what to do and we just feel stuck, then it can become a problem, because then the mental health condition can escalate and it can reach heights that if there was intervention or help was sought, maybe it didn't have to get that far. And then by far, I mean, that's when it might present as, for instance, crisis.
So I know you mentioned earlier that mental health is a spectrum, right? Oh my God, I just got my vaccine yesterday, so please excuse me. If this is the spectrum, this is a straight line, right? What you're seeing is that if this is the center point and someone is out here, this being, you know, negative, which is poor, this is positive. Are you seeing that a person who is not feeling well, when they wake up, they're experiencing a bit of sadness, right? And they acknowledge it and they pursue a little bit of self-help strategies. Perhaps it's, you know, dipping themselves in, like, I don't know, salt in the tub with salt and you know, all of those herbs, and they're starting to feel slightly better. They got themselves to get out of their house and push themselves to go for a walk, and now they're slightly feeling better and they're moving towards the positive side. Versus someone who wakes up in the morning and is not feeling well, they're feeling a bit of sadness they're experiencing, but they're not acknowledging it, or they may acknowledge it, but they're not taking action to change the way they're feeling, and they stay there. And are you saying that over time that gets worse and they keep feeling bad and eventually reaches a crisis situation?
I'm saying that very well can be the case for many. It doesn't mean that it's a definite fact. That's definitely what's going to happen. It may subside gradually on its own, and by on its own, I mean maybe something did happen to change the situation, but the individual's not aware of it, if that makes sense. And because mental health is also related to biological factors. It could be, for instance, a chemical imbalance. And that could be like, for instance, when we think about the menopause and how that might present, you know, when you're having those hot flushes and you're feeling really uncomfortable, because it comes in waves, you know, it might subside, it might pass, and then you're fine. And it's not because you've particularly done anything to change the situation. It's more the biochemistry. But what I am saying is that it does increase the likelihood that things could get worse if you don't address the problem or seek help. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a common saying that avoidance keeps the problem going. So if we just put it off and we don't address it, you know, like, then we're likely to stay in that space of stuckness or, you know, depressed mood.
I love that. Thank you. Some more comments coming in here. Wonderful insights. Thank you, Sarah. Seeing two simple words, me too, can be so liberating. I second that. I second that. And I think it also, like you said, it opens up room for other people who may be feeling the same way or a similar way to speak up then. And then we can connect with each other on a deeper level. Absolutely. Let's talk about recovery now. Sarah, I know, given everything that's happening and we are all experiencing, you know, mental health professionals as well feel, you know, it's not like they don't feel, they experience challenges as well. What are some tools that you can recommend, certain self-help strategies or other help that may be available for us to take care of our mental health professionals? Because if we can make sure that our professionals are good, they can go out and help other people to the best of their capability, right? So what are some tools, strategies, or resources that you're able to share with us today?
Yeah, so I guess some strategies is just tuning into yourself first and foremost, you know, like not ignoring when you don't feel great, you know, not trying to push through and ignore it. I think that's definitely a first, you know. The more you can tune in to yourself, and even, for instance, your circadian rhythms, so, you know, like your sleep patterns, and what we call sleep hygiene, so, you know, how much you are able to regulate your sleeping pattern and abide by a certain set of routines that inform your sleep, and your regularity of sleep, your frequency of sleep, things like that. Getting enough sleep is important. So that feeds into your well-being. Also, things like basic self-care. I think we, particularly during the pandemic and lockdown, I think we can safely say we've enjoyed lying in bed more, and work from home doesn't mean that you're working at a desk. And sometimes we can forget how that does take its toll on our bodies and our minds, and even just not getting out there enough and embracing the scenery, you know, on a lovely walk, like you mentioned earlier. Like, it makes such a difference. Get out into nature, listen to some music if you're feeling down and stuff like that, you know, because music can change your mood. When you're feeling down and you play something a bit more upbeat and stuff like that, it can really elevate your mood, and it's such a wonderful way to feel better in that moment as well. And sometimes you resonate with the words differently according to your mood as well, because it speaks to your soul. That's what I believe anyway. So I just think it's so powerful.
I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And tune into your community. You know, like right now we have this beautiful application that's open to anyone called Clubhouse. Whether you're an Android user or iOS, join our clubs on Clubhouse. We host 2 rooms every week on Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays is giving back to yourself, and Thursdays is ask a psychologist or a mental health professional. We have another question from the audience. What would inclusive mental health care that supports neurodiversity look like to you, Sarah? Beautiful question.
It is. It's funny because I'm actually trying to work on this at the moment, because there's just not enough out there. So at the moment, I'm using self-advocacy as a practitioner myself, and talking about my experiences and meeting with clients and in our sessions, tailoring the interventions that I give according to those experiences of being a neurodiverse identifying individual, if that makes sense. So, for instance, there's something called alexithymia, which is kind of like your experience of, it's to do with like emotion regulation and your internal environment. So, you know, for instance, how you experience anxiety and you might have a rapid heartbeat and stuff like that, and how you make sense of that experience of, for example, anxiety. It's experienced different if you're a person on, that identifies as being neurodiverse, because you have sensory differences, for example. So being able to have that awareness of how someone might experience the world differently and what those differences might be is really key in mental health care, to be able to support someone who is neurodiverse.
And where can people learn more about how they can offer the best care or just better care to someone who is experiencing it?
My first go-to would be, if you know someone who is neurodiverse, ask them like what would be supportive, because I think the more you can kind of tune into those people around you that might need support, you know, especially if they're a friend or a close family member and they look like they need a bit of help, instead of just trying to kind of throw things in their direction. Although you're trying to be as helpful as possible, sometimes it can exacerbate things like anxiety or low mood or create frustration because it's not what the individual wants. So the best way to help that individual is literally to ask if there's anything they need or if there's anything they can do to support.
Quite often, Sarah, when we ask people, you know, we want to be there and support people. And quite often people they require space, right? They just want the space to understand what's going on, or just, you know, perhaps to fix it themselves, because a lot of times we feel that way. And I get it, that's very normal. Everyone has different ways of coping. Everyone has a different way of healing, of feeling good. But when would you say it's too much space? Or is there something called too much space? Like, when do we as support intervene? When is it okay for us to intervene?
Yeah, when the too much space becomes withdrawal. So when the person's physical health, for example, there's signs that their physical health is being neglected through like sleep, eating, hygiene, then we know that there's definitely more to that situation, I'd say. So, you know, it's no longer just about needing that space. That space has become all encompassing because it's allowing a disengagement with everyday life and living. And if you're not engaging with that, then there's a problem.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We have another comment from the audience. Sarah is always so well informed when she talks about mental health on Clubhouse. I really look forward to chatting with her on Mondays and Thursday talks. That's true. Thank you, whoever you are. You're probably one of the individuals that does tune in. So thank you for being here. That's so amazing. That means these talks work, Sarah.
This is great.
This is great. Thank you. I have so many questions for you, to be honest. I know you mentioned that you work with the youth as well.
Yeah.
We don't have much time, but I still want us to address this particular topic, is the youth mental health. You know, given what is happening right now in the pandemic, students are not going to class. And even in some parts of the world where schools have opened, there have been tons of lockdowns. Children are still staying back home, which doesn't just impact the child's mental health. Something that we're not talking about is also the parents' mental health, right? And in certain environments, certain cultures, there's such a big stigma when it comes to mental health that parents themselves don't seek help, let alone the child who is, suffering from poor mental health. What could we do to advocate, for those people in those situations and circumstances, for the youth, as for the children, as well as the parents?
Yeah, so this is where systems are so important, right? Because the first thing that I've picked up is the fact that we're talking about a child, for example, that I would assume would be in school, because we mentioned school. And so in that system that we're talking about, what's important is the school, you know? So if the school teacher, for example, or another member of staff within that school can pick up on, you know, that child not perhaps being okay, then that's really key, because by doing that, then that professional can then talk to the family and find out a bit more information.
I love that. I love that you brought up the word system because it all just makes sense. We need to introduce mental health advocacy, mental health care in schools.
Yes, yes, definitely.
That's a great solution. So precise and articulate. Love it. Sarah, we're going to have to bring you back onto our show next season because I think there's so much we can talk about. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? If not, if is could you please share one message that you like to leave the audience with? You know, perhaps someone that's tuned in, not feeling very good, and kind of isolated or lost and confused. Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, like I want to encourage and empower that individual that we're talking about to say me too, you know, like, and I'm saying similarly, I've had a really tough week. Work has been a lot. The pandemic has affected us all. Me too, you
Me
know?
too.
Too.
I'm with you on that. But we're here today, right?
Yeah,
That's us in real time being advocates right here. Recovery is possible.
definitely. For us all.
Yeah, absolutely, for us all. If you are looking for support, if you're looking for any kind to access any kind of mental health care, please reach out to us at Reach Out Together. You can send us an email at resource@reachouttogether.com. We're running a completely free of cost program. We started this in the beginning of the pandemic. Um, if you don't know where to go to get help, we have a team dedicated to doing the research for you depending on where you physically live. We'd be happy to send you some in-person services, counselors, therapists, depending on what you are experiencing, or we may refer you to some online therapy or other online help that exists. We'd also be happy to connect you to Sarah if you'd like to further the discussion. Where can people find you, Sarah?
So people can find me on a website called diversityinclusivepsychology.org. If you drop a message there, in the message section right at the bottom of the page, then you can get in touch.
Love it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap up, I want to quickly ask you, do you know what this logo stands for?
That is sign language.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think what it means. I think you might need to fill me in on the rest. It's togetherness.
Close. That was incredible. So this is the logo of Reach Out Together, and it's two fists put together. It means together in sign language.
Yes, so I got it right. I said togetherness. So yeah.
Oh, you did. Oh my God, that's brilliant. Look at that. I love it. So yeah, it's basically it's an instructor putting your palms together and going in a circle, and that's how people would know that, you know, instructors saying do it together, do the activity together. We put the circle around to symbolize the world. We use the color orange because all orange in color healing therapy, it brings out feelings of warmth and happiness. And our mission at Reach Out Together is to heal the world together, conversation by conversation, community by community, you know, resource by resource. We're here for you. Just reach out to us and we would be happy to guide you to any kind of professional help or self-help that exists out there. And also, Sarah, what we did today here was exactly that. You know, we had a conversation about mental health. I know it's an introductory conversation, but we're going to bring you back and we're going to keep these conversations going.
Definitely. definitely. I'll be back and I'll be waiting for all the questions that come in as well. It's been so lovely.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you. This is a wrap of today's episode. If you are still tuned in till the very end and you have a message to share, whether that's lived experience or professional expertise, please reach out to us. You can contact Ankita from our team. Her email is ankita@at reachouttogether.com, and we'd be happy to have you on our show to share your message. Thank you, everyone, for reaching out together for better mental health. Until next time. Bye, Sarah.
Bye.